From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there and welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. Well, we already know that Mayor Preckwinkle or Mayor Lightfoot is going to be coming into office facing some massive problems. We talk about them all the time right here on the show. But one really thorny, complicated situation has got to get resolved pretty quickly by the new mayor. And there doesn't seem to be any way that everybody's going to walk away from it happy. We're referring to that suite of controversies generally called the Obama Presidential Center. Open space activists don't want it in the park. Community activists are demanding that the OPC share its wealth with the neighborhood through community benefits agreements. Low-income residents are freaking out about gentrification. There's a plan to turn almost a quarter of Jackson Park into a high-end golf resort that would wipe out a nature preserve. And there's a new controversy swirling around about the type of institution it'll be, not a full-fledged research center like the other presidential centers, or so it seems. Well, in the past few days, we've had a useful, definitive summary of all these interlocking controversies. It got published a couple of days ago. It's called Will Obama's Presidential Center Invigorate or Gentrify Chicago's South Side? And it's written by Chicagoland freelance writer and researcher Audrey F. Henderson, who specializes in sustainable development and the built environment, among other topics. And we are so pleased to have you at the table for the first time, Audrey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. And your story hit at a very interesting and important time because, you know, we're on the verge of a mayoral election, and we were talking just a little bit before we went on, and I have to make the observation that there are few of these things that seem to me to be so multi-layered and so fraught with controversy, because you've got economics, you've got power, you've got presidential politics, mayoral politics, and race. It's all stirring in the same pot.
Yes, it is.
So, where should we begin? You want to talk about the building itself, or what? Where are we? What is the status right now of the library construction? Is it gonna happen sometime soon?
Well, my understanding from talking with the people at the Obama Foundation is that they're waiting for the federal assessment, because there had to be a federal assessment of the property, because it's a nationally recognized landmark. Mm-hmm. So that they're waiting for that before they have any kind of timeline.
So has that begun? Has that process of evaluating it even begun?
I honestly do not know.
Okay.
I don't know where that stands right now. Mm-hmm. And I did ask about the timeline, and they said that they were waiting to hear back. So I don't know what that timeline is. Yeah. And I imagine that there has to be a resolution of the lawsuit, which I think will be resolved rather quickly. The judge seemed to set a short for legal terms timeline. Yeah. So I think that it will be settled one way or the other pretty quickly.
And what is this lawsuit?
This is the lawsuit by Protect Our Parks.
Okay.
And basically their contention is that because the center is not an actual presidential library, it's a private entity. And the lease transfer represents what they call an illegal land grab. So they want it basically, and I've talked to Bob Fioretti, who is one of the attorneys for Protect Our Parks.
Former alderman, that Bob Fioretti?
The former alderman, yes. Yeah. And they are not against having the center in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Again, they just don't want it in Jackson Park.
Right, and initially, that was thought to be one of the big controversies, but then all these other controversies began springing up around it. But the issue of whether it should be located in Jackson Park is a big deal to some people.
Oh, it absolutely
and not a big deal to other people. That's the important part of it, right?
Well, I wouldn't say it's not a big deal. I think the people who are less opposed to it being in the parks, what I've heard is that, on the one hand, a lot of these public buildings, and it is going to be even though it's a private entity, I think it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be open to the public. Things like the Museum of Science and Industry or whatever are in public lands anyway.
Right.
And there's also, from what I've heard, a contention that this is a greater good that's coming to the neighborhoods. So again, it's not that they're not concerned. It's not that it's not a big deal. It's just that it's not a deal breaker.
It's not a deal breaker for people who want that.
Right.
But I wonder if you've, I mean, since you've done some research on this, was there ever serious consideration given to siting it somewhere other than in Jackson Park, or was that just kind of lip service?
You know, that would, I mean, for me to give a definitive answer would be for me to get into Chicago politics, of which I'm not an expert. But there were a number of proposals in various parts of the city. The University of Illinois at Chicago had a proposal. University of Chicago actually had 2 proposals. There were other proposals that were not taken into consideration by the foundation formally, but a couple of years before the actual RFP, there was even a proposal to locate it in the Michael Reese Hospital site.
Yeah.
And that actually, I read an article in Cranes where that was given some pretty serious consideration and favorable consideration. But to be, you know, as far as was it ever going to be anywhere but Jackson Park, I'm not the person to ask about that.
Well, certainly my impression, and I know a lot of people who do enjoy Chicago politics, is that it was wired to Jackson Park from the beginning because Michelle Obama wanted it there, and so there it would be. But the question that's still on my mind is that even given the fact that it's going to be in Jackson, but not the park, Jackson Park, but in the region, there were people who argued that there were so many better places to put it nearby, within a mile or so, just not in the park. You get to save a little piece of parkland, but you also, the argument was made that you're going to stimulate economic development within Woodlawn and other places like that much more effectively if you move it inland a little bit.
Well, that was a suggestion. There were, in fact, I read some articles. I don't remember right off the top of my head where I read them, but there were, you know, several suggestions, I should say, to have it, if they're going to have it in a park, put it in Washington Park as opposed to Jackson Park. But again, I think the reason, overriding reason for putting it where it is in Jackson Park was a section of the article that I got into about the museum's campus south. They really wanted to have that juxtaposition between the Museum of Science and Industry and the Obama Center, and have that be a complex like the museum campus on the South Loop.
Yeah, but you quoted someone as saying, basically, this is a whole different world. I mean, it's not, the museum campus is downtown,
right?
And this ain't downtown.
It's not downtown. You could go both ways. It's not downtown, but you know, the people who are in favor of it say, and the figures that I read cite that it's going to have a significant impact, economic impact. So, you know, it's not downtown, quote unquote, now, but it could really vitalize the neighborhood. So that argument can go both ways.
Your article points out a couple of things that had kind of slipped my mind. I hadn't really thought about it, but the main building, you know, what do we call it, Old Main or something? I don't know, the big building.
The main center, yeah.
That thing is 235 feet high. It's a big building.
It's a big building. And
you kind of forget that.
Yeah, actually, Blair Kamen, that was one of the critiques that I read early on. I don't know how it's going to look in relationship with the rest of the park. I think it's been modified a little bit since its original design. I think, don't quote me on this, but the original design was more closed. I don't think it had as many openings or windows or whatever. So there was that added to it to make it seem less imposing. But that main building, I think, is and this is just my personal take on it, it's supposed to, it gives a sense of stature and gravitas to the center. So I think that might have been the motivation behind it.
Yeah.
But, you know, ask the architects.
Yeah, yeah. I'm also fascinated by the fact that there are so many other, I don't know what to call them, like auxiliary buildings and functions, but a lot of them are activity-based, like a practice, an indoor practice center, a sledding hill, you know, that kind of thing, basketball courts and so forth. And I'm just wondering, doesn't that kind of duplicate some of the things that the park already has? I mean, they already have a field house with athletic facilities and stuff, right?
You know, that I really am not that familiar with it. I think what I got from the Obama Foundation people were that, if I recall correctly, Michelle Obama used to like to go sledding, and that that sledding hill is something that was added, you know, for
I want a sledding hill
for her preference. And the impression again that I got from the Obama Center people was that they wanted the center to include not only their center but amenities that the rest of the neighborhood would enjoy. They really emphasized that they wanted that the majority of the parcel that's allocated for the center is going to be open space, and it's going to be open to the public, and it's going to be, you know, maintained by the center for the benefit of the neighborhood. So, you know, I didn't really think about or get into a lot of the duplication. I'd have to visit the site physically again to see, you know.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've done it myself a couple of times, and when you're kind of standing there trying to visualize it, it's not easy to do. It's kind of complicated, and that brings up the issue of Cornell Drive, of course, which, you know, cuts right through the park, all the way through the park, and they're talking about eliminating 17 blocks of it, I believe, right?
Between 60th and 67th Street.
Oh, 7 blocks.
7 blocks.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
blocks.
misread. I misread your article. I'm sorry.
60th and 67th Street.
Okay.
And that's again to allow for the unimpeded pedestrian traffic between the museum and the center and the lakefront or whatever.
But that's a cost that is not actually built into the cost of the construction of the Obama Center. So we taxpayers are going to have to pay to rip out Cornell Drive. And then, I mean, there's another thing there too. I think I'm right about this. Cornell Drive has parking on both sides of it, doesn't it?
I don't.
Well, neither of us can remember, but I think they're losing a lot of parking when they do that. And then, aren't they going to have to do something with Stony Island? So, like, visualize the park, folks. Okay, it's like here you are, and then Stony Island is on the west side of the park. It's a straight street that runs all the way down. And there's a bunch of institutional buildings there, high schools, all that kind of stuff.
And yeah, one of the people I talked to, Jawanza Malone, mentioned that very instance about the schools that are there, about the daycare center that's there, and basically redirecting all that traffic to Stony Island is going to, well, as he put it, turn it into an expressway.
Yeah, yeah.
I do not own a car, so I really do. I'm not that knowledgeable, but it sounds like it's going to be something that they have to work out. The logistics are something that they have to work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that from reports that I read earlier that it's going to cost about 400 mature trees just for the Obama Center itself, and possibly as many as another 300 trees have to come down for the widening of Stony Island. So in order to create this open space, we have to sacrifice hundreds and hundreds of really nice looking mature trees, most of which are in pretty good shape as far as I know.
Yeah, I read somewhere that there were mature trees that would have to come down, but I didn't read a number. So
yeah. Well, again, this is what we're talking about. It's very controversial. Everybody's got their own sets of facts, and it's hard to try to figure it all out. The most important thing, I think, when we talk about the controversies is this CBA, the Community Benefits Agreement. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I'll quote you back to yourself. In your story, you say, the Obama Foundation has flatly refused to agree to negotiate or, let me say that again, the Obama Foundation has flatly refused to agree to, negotiate, or sign such an agreement, insisting with considerable evidence to back its claims that it's taken significant and concrete steps to ensure that the center brings maximum benefit to the community while minimizing displacement. So that's their position, right? We don't want to talk to you about community benefits agreements.
I wouldn't go as far as say that we don't want to talk to you about it. My take is that their position is that we, and again, this is quoting an article from the Reader and quoting from the Obama Foundation, we don't want to have to negotiate with multiple community organizations because it's a diverse community. We want to ensure that we're dealing with everybody. We don't want to deal with some and not this and not that. And again, you know, I am not a resident of the community. The people I've talked to have said that's not a convincing argument. But the part that does seem, you know, convincing, or not convincing, but compelling to me, is that they really have taken a lot of concrete steps. The
foundation?
The foundation, right, to accommodate the concerns of the community. What I heard, one of the most compelling statements I heard during my interviews was from Jawanza Malone again. You know,
he's with Coco, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he said, you know, yes, we acknowledge that they're taking our concerns seriously. They've done this, and they've done this, and they've done this, and these are some of the things we've asked for. So it's not that they're dismissing the concerns, but he did make what I thought was a very valid point, is that business is conducted with legally binding agreements, and that's what they want. They want a legally binding agreement. So, you know, I wouldn't go as far as to say that they've been dismissive. The foundation has been dismissive. I don't think that's the case at all. But I don't know, and the impression I get is that their argument that they want to deal with everybody and not have to deal with one or the other, or not some and not some, that's not really convincing to the people that I've talked to.
Well, I mean, if you enter into a business agreement, or you build a building or whatever it is, you sign contracts, right? You get the lawyers together and you say, this is what we want, this is what we want. You come up with an agreement, everybody signs it, and then you're bound to it. It just, I mean, it does seem fairly natural to me that if something so massive is going to happen in a community, and the community is so concerned about the effects that it could have, that, you know, what's wrong with having an agreement, or what's wrong with having a contract, right?
Well, that's basically what I've been hearing.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. The question that sort of still hangs in the air about this is what kinds of things do the community. We don't know who the community people all are, as the Obama people say. It could be 30 or 40 people we haven't heard from yet. But to the extent that we know, what are the things that are most of greatest concern in the community? What are the things that they want agreements to cover?
I think one of the most overriding concerns is displacement. Job opportunity. Now, one area where it appears that the foundation has been very responsive is in oversight and appointing minority-owned firms for different aspects of the construction and the design and the whatever. But I think if you have to pick one concern, I would say it would be displacement. And again, especially among renters. On the other side, homeowners, some of whom are thinking, well, if this is going to raise my property value, some are concerned about property taxes. Others are saying, well, it'll raise the equity in my house, and it'll be more valuable. But again, you know, there are several layers about.
Oh, there always are, yeah. But then that has two or three faces to it too, because if the equity in your house goes up, there's going to be a great incentive for you to say, I think I'm going to get out of here, right? I'm going to sell this while I can and see if I can do better somewhere else. So it's another form of displacement. It also ends up being displacement. And another point to me is that the housing stock in and around Jackson Park, some of it is pretty dilapidated, but it's still good stuff. It's got good bones, as the developers like to say, right? So these are the kinds of places that developers just love to come in and buy cheap and fix up and, you know, gentrify.
Yeah, and the gentrification is a concern, although there is a lot of there's a lot of activism around self-determination. You know, we want to, we being the people who live in the neighborhood, want to determine how our neighborhood, I don't want to use the word gentrifies, but you know, how it's revitalized. And it's not a passive process at all. People are not kind of sitting back and, oh, let's see what the center, that's not the impression I get at all.
It's not like that.
No, it's not like that.
You know, it's something that we're facing virtually everywhere in the city right now. And every city, I suppose, is facing it too. But, you know, how much gentrification, or let's just call it improvement, is good, and where is the tipping point where it becomes dangerous and where it harms people? And I think the answer to that is every single neighborhood is different. The balance is different.
Well, I don't even know if that's quite the way to look at it. And again, this is my social science training coming in. If you look at just gentrification in the conventional sense, and you know, I don't have any nice way of putting it.
Conventional gentrification.
But you know, conventionally is neighborhoods of color being displaced by white people. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that with Jackson Park or with Woodlawn or whatever, there's also you have to also consider different class considerations. Even among African Americans, among Latinos or people of color, you know, the whole thing is that all black people are not poor. All black people are not this, all black people are not that. So you really can't look at it as gentrification of just removing black people for white people. I think that's oversimplifying it a little bit.
And my sense of it is that this is a community, the community in that sort of broad area, Kenwood, Oakland, Hyde Park, all of it, is an area where you have a very diverse and broad spectrum of African American citizens. Education-wise, income-wise, and everything else. So it's not, it's too simple to just call it a black versus white kind of thing. The class part of it and the level of education part of it plays a huge role in this.
Well, also with the gentrification or the revitalization, that's a word I preferred actually. Revitalization, ideally, would be that people who live, and this is something that the foundation was saying, they want to ensure that people who are already in the neighborhood benefit from the added amenities. Because what happens a lot of times with gentrification is, you know, all of a sudden you have all these amenities. You have the grocery stores, and you have the museums, and you have the banks, and this, and then all the rents and the housing prices go up, and nobody can afford to live there anymore. It's like, where was all this stuff when we were living here?
That's not funny, but yeah, I think there's just a huge irony in all of that. At this point, is this inevitable? Is it going to happen? Is it going to get built?
I'm
surprised to see you equivocating on it.
Well, I think it's going to get built. I don't think the Obamas are going to pull up stakes and, like George Lucas did, and move to Los Angeles. I don't think that's going to happen.
In Los Angeles.
Where it's going to end, you know, is it going to end up in Jackson Park? Maybe. Is it going to end up somewhere else? I don't know. I mean, odds are probably, but you know, I wouldn't put, I would not say definitively, yes, it's going to go this way, or yes, it's going to go that way.
So you think there's still a chance? And of course, we haven't even stirred the mayor thing into this yet, because both mayors have said they want community benefits agreements. So that's going to put them at odds with the Obamas. And I don't think we know how they feel about the use of Jackson Park, whether they're in favor of it or not. So we'll find that out probably in the next few weeks too. It's going to get interesting. And we didn't talk about the golf course. Give me a minute on the golf course.
Well, okay. Now, the thing about the golf course, you mentioned at the beginning about how much acreage it was going to take. I don't know that it's going to take as much acreage out of the park as, my reading was that there was one section of about 4 acres right at the lakefront that they wanted to use. Yeah. But the golf course is interesting. That's the part that I probably have the least handle on. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's been kind of under the radar. I mean,
it's been kind of under the radar. Yeah. It's related, but I don't think it's integral. And I really don't know where that stands.
Well, neither does anybody, I guess, except the mayor and maybe the park district or something. But it just seems so weird at a time when we're reading that golf courses everywhere are closing, that you know, it's becoming an aging out kind of thing, that older people play golf and younger people are not so much, and that there's this need for this massive investment in golf in Jackson Park, when I would seem to me, although I don't live in Jackson Park either, but it would seem to me that that's not the highest and best use of Jackson Park. But as you say, the golf courses are there already. It's just a matter of upgrading them, and then that becomes an issue of gentrification all of its own, doesn't it?
Well, that was one thing I did read, in that the plans for the golf course, the revised plans, they definitively said that there would be no fees for young people under 17 and younger, and that the adult residents would only have to pay less than $50. So I don't, you know, that's in their plans. So unless they change their plans, I don't see that as being that, you know, a major issue.
So keep on this story, will you please? We'll need updates, especially after the mayor is elected. We're going to need to know what's going on. Audrey, thank you so much. I'm really glad you were able to come and join us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks. Audrey Henderson is, as we said, an independent freelance writer who writes about all kinds of significant issues that are going on in the city and in urban areas. And she wrote this piece. I'm sorry, my notes just got away from me. It's New City, right?
Next City.
Next City. I'm sorry.
Next City.
I apologize. Next City. It freaks me out sometimes when I just look down and I don't see it there. Next City. You can see it online. It's very easy to get to, and the story is written by Audrey Henderson. Check it out. Google it. Okay. Thank you, Audrey. We'll talk to you later on. And you're watching Chicago Newsroom. We'll be right back.
This is Chicago Newsroom.
And we're back. It's Chicago Newsroom with Ken Davis. So let's see if I understand this correctly. We're drowning in pension debt. We've got police and fire and teacher contracts just around the corner. We're going to need $1 billion at least every year from now on. We're raising taxes and fees just to keep our fiscal heads above water, but no worries. All the experts and smart people are telling us that casino gambling is going to save the day. Just open a casino at McCormick Place or Water Tower Place, maybe Stroger Hospital, they say, and the money will just come rolling in so fast that by 2030 we're going to repeal property taxes. Well, you know, there's always another side to every story, and it fell to Bob Reed to sober us all up in this recent piece of his in Chicago Magazine called Why a Chicago Casino May Never Happen. Well, maybe we'll just have to wait for the marijuana revenue to save us. Rob Reed is a former business editor of the Chicago Tribune. He writes frequently and regularly about you know, smart things in Chicago business for Chicago Magazine and others, and I am so glad to have Bob back at the table here. Welcome back.
Good to see you.
I want to talk about this casino thing, but we just finished a conversation with Audrey Henderson about what's going on in Hyde Park, Kenwood, Jackson Park. And the magic, the 3 letters that we are dealing with right now is CBAs, Community Benefit Agreements. You got any thoughts about that?
I don't know what's so bad about them. I can't quite figure out why the Obama Center has dug in the way it has. And I understand that they are being receptive to the concerns that the community is voicing. But it is absolutely right that, you know, you trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways you do that is by entering into an agreement. Mm-hmm. It's been done in other cities for other major projects, in Oakland, I think Philly, Los Angeles. Seems to work out pretty well. It had some trouble, I believe, in New York. Yeah. But I don't quite understand why they are so reluctant to get into it, except perhaps from a legal standpoint, they don't want to be bound to certain hiring restrictions and promises that maybe they feel they can't keep. But I think it would be a tremendous show of good faith if they would enter into an agreement with the community, and I think it actually could be a nice example for other projects too. I mean,
we are talking about a guy who was president of the United States of America for 8 years and had to deal with the Russians and the Chinese and, you know, every other little 2-bit country out there that wanted something from us. And he managed to get through that pretty much unscathed. You would think he would be able to deal with cocoa or something and come up with something. And I don't quite understand this thing of you know, how they'll have to have agreements with 50 or 70 or 80 different. No, you come up with an agreement that this is what we propose to do for the community, right?
I would think so, and I was perplexed by that too. And you know, your previous guest made the comment that they were concerned about who the other actors were going to be. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's that difficult to determine. It looks to me like there's a pretty cohesive coalition already beginning. Yeah, yeah. So you'd have a good idea. And frankly, it's up to the community groups to determine that. I don't think it would be the Obama Center's issue. But I think that there's a real value in it. It's interesting that both the mayoral candidates have come out for it. Mm-hmm. Preckwinkle, though, has said they think they can do it without the Obama Center, that basically this is something the city could negotiate.
That's interesting.
I'm not quite certain how that, if I understand that correctly, I'm not quite certain how that would work, but she has said that in her time as being an alderman in that area, that they did it with Michael Reese and some other places. Yeah. So, you know, there's ways to get it done if you want to get it done.
Right, and she's got Chance the Rapper on her side now. He just endorsed her just a couple of minutes ago, so she's got more power even still, right? Yeah. This is such a difficult stew of, it's like almost every urban issue that's out there is stirred into this Obama library thing. I mean, when you talk about displacement and gentrification and you know, just racial tensions, it's really kind of a nasty situation.
And rich versus poor.
Oh,
unfortunately. But,
absolutely,
you know,
yes.
And when you were talking about the way that you have to disrupt the traffic flow and the pattern and what that's going to mean to the rest of the community, I think there are some very serious issues about where this is being placed. Yeah. I thought it was interesting your guest couldn't say unequivocally that it's going to go there. You know, I thought that door was pretty well slammed, but
well,
maybe
not. You know, it is interesting that this judge has kind of at least allowed this whole parks advocacy group thing to move forward. So we will see. And I just, you know, I'm just speaking for myself here. I have never quite understood the urgency of having to put it into that park. I know they want it next to the Museum of Science and Industry, but you know, the idea that if it's in the park, it's going to stimulate investment and activity in the community further away, as critics have said, well, yeah, just like the Museum of Science and Industry did, right? I mean, nobody. You go in, you park down in the basement, you spend the day there, you get out, you drive your car away. You don't go into little coffee shops in, you know, in Hyde Park or something.
Well, and I believe that was an argument raised by professors at the University of Chicago. There was a petition or a group that said very much the same thing, that it would actually hurt economic development. It would, and it certainly wouldn't foster it. So yeah, you're right. If you put it in Washington Park or somewhere like that, but you don't have the, I guess, the marquee value of being around the lake.
Right.
And
you can't have that golf course with the money shot.
Yeah, I guess vastly overrated.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we did invite you here to talk about other things, but it's just this is kind of on my mind here today as we've been talking about this. But can we just completely like tear up the whole plan for the show and talk about Boeing? You know a lot about this. I am just flabbergasted by what's going on with Boeing.
Terrible. It is not their proudest moment, and it was unavoidable. When the first time they had indications that this new plane was not working, they should have taken some major steps to correct it. The second plane, they were even reluctant to ground the fleet and find out what's going on. And then when you had every other country, major country in the world doing it, and the United States lagging behind, it's a terrible example because the United States should be a leader in this kind in air safety. So it's the concern is primarily safety. Now, are these planes going to be safe again? Be safe. Is it going to require a patch? Is it going to require completely reworking it? And then how much pilot training do you need? And that seems to have been a breakdown. And the bigger concern is Boeing was involved in the certification, safety certification of the plane. And you know, these are very complex instruments, and you can understand why a company would be involved in it, but it shouldn't be expected to police itself and certify itself. That's why we pay taxes. That's why the FAA
So I just built this big new
do
building downtown, and I just inspected it. It's great. It passed inspection.
Right, and all of a sudden you find out the steel that you used really isn't up to snuff. So it's a very tough time for Boeing. They should have been much more proactive. It's a good thing our government did step in, but it's going to take a while for these planes to get fixed and for public confidence to embrace it.
As I understand it, Boeing developed this new plane because they decided that it was going to be cheaper and more efficient and easier for the production schedule to sort of develop a hybrid of the 737. They're going to build this extended 37. So they build this plane, and they apparently start testing it, and they realized that they had to put bigger engines on it, and so the bigger engines make the plane face upwards. So they're going to have to do something to keep the nose down, right? So there are engineers working on this solution, and they come up with this idea. The people who were working on that patch that put it on that plane, the day that plane went down in Indonesia, those people were on the phone with each other saying, "Holy Mother of God, our software just died," right? It just screwed up.
Something went wrong.
Something went wrong. They knew. They had to know. The people who did that design and made that patch had to know.
Well, if that's true, there's a tremendous liability associated with that then. You know, the problem is that there is a great deal of complexity here, and could it be that it wasn't tested properly, that something went wrong, you know, before it was given the get-go to you know, sell them to people and get them up in the air? I don't know enough about how the production cycles work, but you're right, you know, Boeing has changed the way that it builds planes now, and it has parts being made in different places and assembly being done differently. And you wonder if, you know, all parts of the company were working together the way that they should have worked together.
That's interesting.
And so I think it's going to require a great deal of investigation and soul searching. There's a criminal investigation underway, which is highly unusual when you've had plane crashes. You know,
but Bob, if you were the CEO of Boeing and that plane went down, you would know that this was something went wrong with your plane. You would know it. You would know it the instant that you heard it. And you would be on the phone with all of your people down the line saying, "What happened here? Brief me on this." I can't believe that they didn't know an hour after that plane hit the water that something had gone wrong in their production system or their...
Well, you remember many years ago, Tylenol? And
yes,
somebody poisoned
classic.
Tylenol. This is a classic business case. And the CEO at that point pulled Tylenol off the shelves completely. They went dark on it until they found out what happened in the production chain that brought that on, or how it was corrupted. And the same thing should have applied in this situation. Ray LaHood was talking to the Sun Times, former transportation secretary, and he says that they were way too slow and not proactive enough and should have acted much more quickly than they did. And he remembered that when the Boeing Dreamliner had problems, the government grounded it until they found out what was going on. So, you know, this is something that just needs to be done, and it wasn't done, and it's definitely a mark against Boeing. Will it be enough to get rid of the CEO? You know what? I don't know, but it's not looking good. You know, this is a major crisis, and something was out of control.
I've been kind of obsessing on this story since I heard it, because I know it sounds trivial to make the comparison to the Tylenol thing, but that has become the kind of the iconic way of handling properly handling a situation. And wouldn't you think that you would just say, okay, I'm in charge here. I want every one of those planes on the ground in the next 15 minutes or whenever you can get them down, and we're not going to let them fly again until we have looked at every single piece of this. But no,
didn't happen. Should have happened.
And the United States government was complicit.
It looked complicit, and it was definitely dragging its feet. And you know why you had to wait for China and Canada to do it first, I still don't understand.
By the way, while I'm just now I'm just venting. I mean, let's face it, this has gone off the rails a little bit. But the acting director of the NTSB, whose name I can't remember, said something about, you know, safety is our first concern at the NTSB, and so that's why we're taking our time to look at this. And I thought maybe a more accurate thing would be to say the profits of our plane makers are our first concern at the NTSB, and we're also concerned about safety. That would have seemed...
I doubt they would have put it that baldly.
Well, anyway, so hey, we brought you here to talk about casinos. It was a great piece in Chicago Magazine, just kind of like pouring gallons of ice cold water on our dreams.
Those casino dreams are fading and fading away. It seems, you know, there's so many obstacles to it, and even though Governor Pritzker has made noises about expanding gaming, he's really hot to expand sports betting, which could lead to more internet betting. The mayoral candidates are in favor of casinos in concept, but and the current mayor says he is too, but he's not quite certain where he'd like it to go, downtown or on the southeast side. But none of that may matter because market forces are taking over. They're seeing the casino revenues are dropping. You have way too much competition, particularly in northern Illinois. If you had a Chicago-based casino, they'd have to change the laws in order to do it. And anytime you have to go to the General Assembly,
or they'd have to build a river in the middle of the city.
Right. You know, but because right now they have to be riverboat casinos. And anytime you go to the General Assembly, it's a free-for-all when it comes to casinos because other parts of the state want one too. So it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon, and it may not happen, as I mentioned, because you're beginning to see, frankly, millennials aren't going to casinos like the older folks are.
Those millennials are such disruptors, aren't they?
Are.
They just change everything they touch.
Well, it has to do with the phones. They prefer to do it, gambling and other things like that by the phone. When you get into sports betting, that's going to open up that path. And even I had a legislator say to me, you know, are the casinos' days numbered? It's a good question. So you may find that casinos are going to have to really rethink how they do business to get younger people. So
that explains why all the people at casinos are old people when you walk through them, generally speaking.
You know, I went to Rivers Casino on a weekday afternoon, and mostly everybody there was older than me, and they were just pouring the money into the slots. There were younger guys there. They looked to me like guys who maybe worked at O'Hare or something and then took some time to come over to the casino. And they were playing the crap tables and the table games. But it wasn't there weren't a lot of young folks, on the floor.
Explain sports betting to me. What is it and how is it different from other gambling?
Well, I think the big difference is that it used to be a black market. It was illegal, and so you basically bet,
something in the barber shop.
Bet on the line or whatever. And now the Supreme Court has made it legal, and the states are wanting to get in on the action. And the casinos in particular would like to have a room where they can do sports betting, put the lines up there, and again, connected via the internet and such. There's a ton of money that goes through.
That already exists in Vegas, though,
it does,
right?
yeah.
Where you have the sports book rooms. Those are fascinating, with thousands of screens everywhere and everything.
And so, Illinois thinks it's going to make, a ton of money off of this just by licensing. I think Pritzker said something like $200 million annually through the licensing of this.
Okay.
So, he's got an incentive to get it, but getting it right is going to be a challenge too, because once again, there are all these different gaming interests in Illinois, the casinos, the racetracks, everybody wants a cut of the action.
Everyone wants a piece of it. So, I mean, by the time everybody gets their piece, the piece that goes into the state coffers is going to be pretty small. And that has to be divided, I assume, to counties and everything else, right? Everybody gets a piece of that, right?
The revenue distribution hasn't been determined, but and I think Politico did a piece about video gaming, and the revenues are nowhere near what it was anticipated to be, and therefore the places that money was supposed to go for the public good they haven't received it.
I know BEZ did a piece not long ago on how these machines are just in every bar and laundromat everywhere. Yeah. And the amount of money they're raising is next to nothing.
Yeah, not in Chicago though. And the restaurant industry actually would like to have it legalized here because they think that would bring parity. But I don't find it to be a particularly attractive environment. When I go someplace,
just sit in a gas station.
Sit in a gas station and play a video game. I got nothing against gambling, but
don't be such an elitist now.
No, I try not.
But what about the idea that if we did one really super great casino, in like Lakeside Center or something in McCormick Place, or some central place downtown where all those conventioners and everything can all play, wouldn't that make, it still seems to me that would still make a lot of money for a few years.
I think it has a lot of merit from that perspective, but I think it has to be part of a broader, if you will, either entertainment complex or someplace that will feed off the existing entertainment venues, the theaters, the restaurants, and so on. And it would be aimed primarily at the tourist trade, right? And the Chamber of Commerce is very much in favor of that, and they see all sorts of good things emanating from having a casino. They've been in favor of a casino since 1991. What was interesting is that Mayor Emanuel kind of threw a wrench into that when he opined that maybe they should open the restaurant along the Indiana border because he's seen all that money going into Indiana, and he would like to get it back. There's an argument that that's a myopic view because you shouldn't be trying to get money from Indiana or Wisconsin, but rather you should be building up the business,
building something new
with the tourism and something new.
Right. And I mean, one of the things that is just a straight up win for Mayor Emanuel has been that he's increased the tourism in Chicago dramatically in the last couple of years, and we're seeing like record numbers of people coming for just personal family tourism or for business tourism. And
they're not coming to gamble either.
No, that's right. But you might be able to squeeze a little out of them if you had the right venue that was really kind of cool and didn't seem tawdry and these depressing riverboat boats out in Indiana are just kind of elitism again. There you go. But anyway, as it stands right now, we're kind of cooked, aren't we? Because we don't have we're not going to get much casino revenue. We're not going to get much of this marijuana revenue that everybody's been talking about. So all of these kind of things, these things that are out on the horizon don't seem to be quite as glitzy as they appeared to be.
I think that's right. I mean, you know, it's going to take time to get it right, get the laws passed, get it out to market, and then see what the reaction is. You know, you're talking a 2 or 3 year timeline. Pritzker knows this. I mean, you know, he understands that it's going to take time. But I guess the sooner you begin, the sooner, you know, you get to that place.
We got a couple of minutes left. We've got about 5 minutes left. Let's just talk a little bit about just raw politics. I've been really intrigued by the idea that the business community has been just left adrift. They have nothing. They have no idea what to do. Bill Daley left them. They were all hot for Bill Daley. They'd already made plans to switch from Rahm to Bill. Everything was going to be even better than it was, and suddenly, poof! It's Lori and Lori and Tony. Who do you choose?
That's their question. They were looking for a champion, and they don't have one out there right away. And I think right now business is in a tough spot in terms of they look at Preckwinkle and they know that she's not reluctant to pull the trigger on taxes if need be. Lori Lightfoot, they don't really know what Lori Lightfoot is about. She, you know, and how receptive she's going to be to the business community and their needs. But having said that, you know, the head of the Chamber of Commerce was on TV saying that what business wants is to be listened to and to be at the table. That's all well and good, but I would also argue... They also
want contracts.
They want, exactly. But I'd also argue that business has to do a lot more listening and will have to do a lot more listening, whoever the new mayor is, because that dynamic is changing. You know, Rahm Emanuel was much more comfortable with the business community and their priorities and their needs. And whoever the next mayor is going to be, I think will have a much more pronounced neighborhood bent. Will ask, well, what, you know, how is this going to help other constituencies besides, you know, the central city and so on? And they're going to have to come up with some answers.
The question that I've been asking so many smart people who come to this table is, why can't a commercial developer, a for-profit developer, develop affordable housing? Is there a reason why that can't be done, or they just don't want to?
They don't want to. Right.
It's just you can't make as much money.
No, you can't make as much. And all of these big projects are based on scale. And, you know, the bigger, the better to get the best price you can for the land that you're buying. Do they, you know, affordable housing, do they want it on site? I mean, that's been one of the issues with the Holding Yards thing. What do they have? They went from 300 units to 600 units, and there probably should be many more, and they should be in or around the neighborhood. Well, you know, that's going to be a problem for the developers. So I think that every one of these big parcels has to have some element of affordable housing in it. But affordable housing is a very controversial thing. You know, you've seen it in some of the wards in Chicago when affordable housing issues come up. You know, there are those in the neighborhood who rebel. Because they don't want it, and so it's a very tough thing, but it's something you need for pricing people out of the market.
Yeah, and it all just seems so unimaginable to me that we have the amount of open space that we have, of just, you know, hundreds and hundreds of blocks that have maybe half of the lots open that can be developed. And I don't know, I just think to myself sometimes, like, if I had a lot of money and I wanted to, could I be a developer who goes in? I asked Willie Wilson this question a couple of weeks ago too. It's like, I live in a frame bungalow out on the northwest side that was developed in 1922. They built like 12 blocks. It's a subdivision. It was obviously housing for people who make very little money. It was an affordable housing community, and it still kind of in many ways is, because those places are getting second stories put on them now and all that kind of thing. Why can't we build something like that today? Why can't we build a community of single-family homes that are quote-unquote affordable, but they're connected to the grid, and they're not, you know, we're not building towers and stuff like that. Why can't we build neighborhoods?
Well, I think we can build neighborhoods. We just haven't had the vision or the will to do it. And the other part is that the developers are justifiably in it to make a buck.
Yeah.
And they can't get the financing by taking a flyer. They have to be able to prove that there's a reason that there's demand for what they're doing.
But there is demand, isn't there?
Yeah, but I don't know if it pays as quickly as they would want it, and all of those things. And it probably has more risk associated to it, which is why the government has to get involved in spurring it on, and giving away TIF dollars and all sorts of incentives should come with more strings attached. And I think both the candidates have talked about that.
Yeah. $1 billion is about to be sent to Lincoln Yards. 1.3 with interest, I guess. Right?
How about it?
1.3 billion.
Yeah.
So we can do it when we need to, when we want to.
Yeah, that's a massive complex, and that's not the only one in the pipeline. You've got one going up by the Michael Reese site, and you have the what do they call it? The 78 Chicago, which is around Chinatown and the river. Yeah. And now this new one that's being proposed, just west of Soldier Field over the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the renderings of that, but it's like taking downtown Columbus and putting it putting it next to Soldier Field.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, all those people will have unobstructed views of the Bears games, so the Bears are going to be like the Cubs. They're going to have to put up curtains or something. We are out of time, Bob. Thanks. It's always a pleasure to have you here. There's so many things to talk about, and you know so much, so thank you.
Good to see you.
Bob Reed is a freelancer for Chicago Magazine and other publications. He worked for the Tribune for a long time. He's been a business reporter and observer for many, many years, and it's a pleasure to have him here at our table. You're watching Chicago Newsroom, as you probably already know, and we will be back next week. Something else, and then the week after that, it's the election, so wow, we're going to be busy. You can go to this particular address to get all of our back shows. There's hundreds of them you can watch. Just spend a weekend watching Chicago Newsroom. And we'll be back next week. Thanks so much, Ken Davis. And thanks to Dave Resnick for producing this extravaganza today. Bye-bye.